Do you have any books that you've come across as actors that have been especially influential to you?
I'm trying to think. Is it The Art of Acting by Uda Hogan? That might be the one. I love that one. That one's one of my favorites. I picked that up at a bookstore because one thing about me, my minor at school is graphic design, so I do believe you can judge a book by its cover. So I picked that one up because it had a really pretty cover, and I was like, I'm doing theater, I'm doing art, I might as well. And it turned out to be really, really useful, and like a really good way to be cohesive and really get into character work. I've also picked up one called, I'm trying to remember, I just got it from one of my professors. It might be called The Artist and the Acrobat, which is about physicality. Or it might be The Heart of the Acrobat. It's something about an acrobat where it's about using physicality and like how that can really get you into the mentality. I wish I could remember off the top of my head. There's also one that another understudy here has been telling me about that I just purchased, and I haven't received it yet, but I've been very excited, called Performing Shakespeare Unrehearsed. Have you heard about that one? I think, yeah, one of our external understudies, Lauren Jones, told me about that one, where it's about being able to learn specific cues and things from the scripts of Shakespeare, to be able to pick it up and immediately be able to just read the script and know exactly what your cues are, how to enter, how to exit, how to gesture to people, and I think that's something that's super useful and super handy.
I would love to have a great answer for that question. Honestly, most of the reading I do is sort of dramaturgical, like research about the characters and getting into the brain space of the story that's being told. And I think also there's a lot of value, at least in my opinion, in researching like the history of the form. So like the history of comedy is very interesting to me. But I honestly, as an actor, like acting technique has always been about observing and trying, like guessing and checking and falling on my face, sometimes literally, sometimes on purpose. But yeah, so I haven't read any like books specifically on acting technique that like unlocked anything for me. But yeah, I just think being generally informed and generally curious is such a big asset. That's my best answer to that.
I've been reading a book called Speaking Shakespeare about a voice coach, acting coach, who specializes in Shakespeare, and her whole premise is that the lines themselves, and when they are in meter, when they're not, give you the cues that you need to be a good Shakespearean actor. And I was wondering if you could comment on that, like how does the language give you those cues? Where are you taking those cues from when you act Shakespeare?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, especially if you look at the text of the folio of the Shakespeare, where there are like lots of weird spellings and things like that, those are all additional clues. Sometimes a word will be spelled strangely or in an unfamiliar way because it's emphasized. Just the whole form of how they would use scansion and orthography is just very different than we do now. So I completely agree. Like I think before, almost every actor who's working here, I'm sure, does this. Before we start rehearsals, we go through and we do scansion for the lines. So we look at the rhythms, we look at operative words, we look at antithesis, where two words are saying different things and creating a comparison. There are a lot of technical aspects. But there is a moment, and like you're saying, looking what's verse, what's not, all the clues really are there. I'm sure that's what the book you're going to read is going to talk about. But I think there is a point also where you kind of let that stuff go. And as long as you know you're breaking a rule, it's okay to not take Shakespeare's advice. One of the things I love about Kaylen Jordan's performance in As You Like It, and if you haven't seen it, please go see As You Like It, is that she has this amazing way of taking the language and making it sound like they're her words, and that there's like you watch her tell these jokes that have probably been told by thousands and thousands and thousands of actors over the decades, and it sounds like no one's ever thought of that joke before, and like she puts it in her own voice in a way that's so unique. That's the kind of skill that I really admire, and that happens once you've done all the groundwork of working with the text and figuring out what you're saying, writing out paraphrases so that you have a good sense of what your tactics are as the character, but then eventually like letting it go and entering a sense of play. As the snake charmer clown in Antony and Cleopatra, I'm still playing around with some of those deliveries and figuring out what the subtext is and how to underline the joke with like certain gestures and things like that. It is kind of an evolving process, but hopefully it deepens over the course of doing the play, multiple times a week over the summer. Any thoughts?
I mean, I was gonna say basically like a lot of the same ideas where it's like once you get the framework, like iambic pentameter can only get you so far. I have ba-dun, da-dun, 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 da-dun stuck in my head all the time and I hate it. Get me out of there. But once you get to a certain point, you really do just have to kind of take off with it because so many people have done Shakespeare. Shakespeare's open source. Plenty of people have done their own spins on Shakespeare. And what's so important is that you make it your own at that point because I could see anyone play Lepidus, but I'd love to see Graham play Lepidus. That's the point. Same with just watching punctuation is really important. I think that sometimes trips people up with lines. That tripped me up with lines. I guess I'm just speaking for myself at this point. But it's a lot of finding the rules and then finding how to subvert them because sometimes they get in the way. Sometimes your performance is more important than how the rules are supposed to be structured.
Can I have one more?
Yeah, please do.
Okay. One more thing I thought of is that inflection and breath affect Shakespeare so much because the intelligibility is so important. And you can tell the difference between an actor who knows how to extend a thought and use their inflection to tell you that there's more coming and then drop at the end of the sentence to tell you the thought is done. And when an actor doesn't have that skill set, it is not necessarily conscious, but it's very difficult to understand and follow their train of thought. So the technical aspect is very important. But like we're saying, I think for me anyway, this is just my take, so this is not representing the Utah Shakespeare Festival necessarily, but I think if you're going to be on stage and you're going to be technically perfect, but you're not showing the things that are making your character want to cry and fight for, then why are we even doing it? That's my opinion.
So I'm interested to know when you're playing so many different characters, and just in general, as a minion who I assume was holding the wings and working the wings in Macbeth, what kinds of things, physical things do you do for yourselves to keep yourselves healthy and in shape and have the endurance to do what you do? And also, what kinds of things do you tend to do after an exhausting performance, especially if you have another show that night? How do you take care of yourselves that way?
So when it comes to going from, because when it comes to Mondays and Thursdays, I have to go from Green Show immediately into Macker's. And so we get about 15 minutes to change out of costume and immediately get right back on stage. So there's not a lot of breathing time there, but I think a lot more of it comes down to vocal, cool downs and warm-ups than actual physical ones. Because with Green Show, it was really funny. One of the first previews we did, one of the performers, my friend Taya, had her Fitbit on and it registered as a full 3-minute sprint throughout the whole show. So there's a lot of keeping physically, I'm not too worried, I'm still young. I don't know about in 5 years, it might be a way different story. But it's mostly about keeping vocally safe for me. So it's a lot of doing good warm-ups before the shows, and then a lot of cool downs. A lot of people don't know that you should also cool down your voice as well after singing or even speaking loudly. So same thing with after finishing a Shakespeare show. It's a lot of just lip trills, a lot of sirens to kind of go through your passaggio and train the voice there. But with the minion work and with, I don't know if we were kind of talking about physicality of changing between characters, but it's a lot of finding where I can relax things that I had put strength in earlier scenes, like in the scene 4-2, I want to say, or it might be, no, it is 4-2 or 4-3. It's the scene between Malcolm and Macduff where they're discussing the plans to go back with young Seward and old Seward. I'm playing young Seward, he's on the mind. But that is fully just standing there, locking the knees and being fully I'm so tense. And my friend AJ and I, who are both playing that part, have to leave the stage and go, oh, I gotta stretch my legs after. And so doing the scenes afterwards, it's a lot of bending the knees, kind of loosening up. If my servant, which is the scene after, it's very loose to kind of loosen myself up at that point. Same thing with the minion, it's a lot of lifting the arms really high and working the arms a lot. So afterwards, it's kind of just doing little exercises there, doing vocal things to just relieve myself. just to kind of get cooled down. That's my plan. That's what I do.
I used to have a 12-hour prep routine for Gentleman's Guide, just because it does kind of feel like I have to be carried out on a stretcher after that show sometimes. But it actually gets much easier, and after 2 weeks, I was down to like 15 minutes. And when I say 12 hours, I just meant like eating 3 meals, sleeping, taking mental space, warming up my voice slowly over the course of the day. But that's only because those things can be a challenge for me. Like eating 3 square meals a day is not really normal for me, so that's ADHD for you. But so anyway, it is amazing though how it gets easier and easier. And with the routine, your body sort of learns which days, like we have a matinee of Gentleman's Guide today, so my body's kind of up and ready, and I made sure to go to bed not too late last night, that kind of stuff. But I think the same things that take care of your body in any other circumstance, just keep it sort of a tuned instrument to some degree. But I'm a little bit of an outlier though, because I kind of thrash my voice a little bit in Gentleman's Guide, and I've just sort of like learned where my own line is. I think for some actors, they might hold back more, but I've just learned that I have kind of a resilient voice, so I can kind of get through it. Yeah, I haven't lost my voice yet.
I'm a stage mom for my daughter, and one of my favorite things is to watch the young people come alive, like shy kid, come out of their shell and become, And I would love to hear, like, how old you were, when you started acting, and also like why, and what your passion, how your passion came alive. I'd love to hear those stories.
Cool. I started when I was very young, like 7 or 8. I was just the kid that was always imitating everything, and I would memorize movie quotes. And my mom actually had to make a rule that we weren't allowed to quote movies at the dinner table because it would take over the conversation for an hour, and she couldn't get a word in. So that's my sort of history, that it's just sort of obvious, and I'm no good at anything else. So I tried to sell out and have an office job. It didn't work out for me. So anyway, it really kind of felt like a calling and sort of like inevitable for me. But I think natural aptitude and delight in theater doesn't necessarily translate into the hard work it takes to train and learn and push yourself. When I was in college, there was a real sense that it's very easy to skate by and graduate, do the bare minimum in an arts program. But the arts are special in that you have an opportunity to really push yourself, and you kind of dictate the pace of your own learning by how far you're willing to push yourself and how hard, you can just sort of set that for yourself. So it's a challenge, but it's also an amazing benefit, because in some ways, as long as you're in a decent environment or you're around people you can learn from, there's almost no upper limit to what you can learn from other people just by watching and engaging.
Yeah, great question. I love this one and I might put a tangent about Green Show in later, because I love talking about the kids there. They're really sweet. But I started when I was like around 7 or 8 as well. My city that I'm from would do these unauthorized like little musicals. Like they would write them every year for the summer and get like children's theater, like your age groups. It was really sweet. And I remember the very first one I ever did was an unauthorized one of Sword in the Stone by Disney. If you work for Disney, that you didn't hear me say that, because it was like a jukebox musical, but it was the plot of Sword in the Stone, and I got to play the coveted role of panicked perch. I was a little fish that got scared by the barracuda. That was me. When you see that show, just know that was me. But that really made me go, I have a part to play. I got to milk my part for all it's worth. I got to swim around and look scared. And I said, this is great. I'm having a great time. And so I kept doing it year after year, and then said, this is really fun, and then dropped it for a few years, and then came back in high school because I loved improv. I think improv's really fun. I've always loved jokes and comedy. I think it's really fun. And I started doing jokes, and I did improv in high school, and someone in there was like, please audition for the musical. And I did, and I said, this is great. And so I've been doing it since then. And I think it's really important for kids to learn at a young age that theater is accessible and fun. And I think, tying back to Green Show's been really, even for on my end, it's been really eye-opening, because we get to every night go out there, and there's a whole bunch of audience interaction. And I remember Monday night, we do in Highland Games, our Monday night one, we do a stick pull where it's like you sit down on the ground and you play a little like tug of war with the kids. And I remember there was this kid I went up to, he raised his hand and then was so scared to do it. And I was like, you're gonna win. I didn't like want to tell him, but we always let the kids win. Don't tell them. But we did it, and I thought nothing of it. The kid like had a little smile, and then like that was the end of that. And then after the show, like way after the show, because I had done Macbeth as well, I come out there, and the kid's mom had come up to me and said that was really sweet. He had been talking about it for the rest of the show. We went and saw Jen's guy, and that was still the only thing he talked about was winning the stick pull. And he was like, this guy's huge, and I beat him. And so even just that moment of letting the kid have their victory, it's a performance. Kids come up there, and they come out of their shell, and it's really cool to see them start to grow and love to do this performance, even if they're scared at first. And it's eye-opening. It's great.
You both mentioned your understudies for different roles. You used one last night. She did a great job. Is the expectation that you will get on stage as an understudy at some point, like scheduled, or is the expectation that you want to do that role?
Well, you have to approach it as though you're going to, because if you get caught with your pants down, it's bad for everybody. You just don't want to let people down. But I think it's a total spin of the roulette wheel, so to speak. You just never know what's going to happen. I understand that last year there were several shows of the 39 Steps where there were 3 understudies on at the same time. You just never know how things are going to play out. But I've understudied stuff where I didn't go on. I've understudied things where I knew in advance that there was one show I would be doing, and I did, weeks of work for a 2-hour performance. And that's just kind of the name of the game with understudying. It's a hard job because it requires more work than it does being in the rehearsal room. If you're actually playing the role as the main actor. And it's a lot less fun, frankly, just because you don't get the opportunity to be in the room with everyone the whole time and really feel like you're watching the production blossom and grow and become the beautiful production that it is. So it's a hard job. I have so much respect for the understudies who are doing 3 roles in different plays, and some of them really sizable. It's a daunting task. Yeah, do you have any other thoughts?
I mean, that's basically like same thing. Most of us have, I know like a few shows I have people in my, other Green Show people already know when they're going to go on for certain roles. It's a lot of just being ready, having at least a bare bones knowledge of all of your roles, so that way, day of, you can go through and write and everything, talk to people. But for the most part, it's very just be ready in as much as you can. Because there's no preparation you can be to fully be and I've done this role a million times.
When you come on the first day of rehearsal, do you pretty much have your part memorized?
Depends on the show. Ideally, yes, especially for a big theater like this, it's expected, because we've gotten most of our scripts at least weeks in advance to know the cut, know what you're giving. But scripts will change, things will always change throughout the rehearsal. And so it's know as much as you can, be as off book as you can. For Green Show, however, not to bring it back to Green Show, but I will. We got our scripts day of, first day, and we each read through all of the parts. We had no casting. It was you'd read through the show, and then by the second or third day, you would have a role and be expected by the end of the week to know as much as you could about the role. And so that way, it was more about picking up as much as you could and being able to be yeah, I know where I fit into the puzzle. And I think, and maybe you'll agree, maybe you'll disagree, it's more about knowing how your character fits in so you can pick up flubs as much as you can.
Yeah, obviously with Shakespeare, it's more important that you have the text locked in. And it will help you, as we come in to know the text so that you can get on to the next stage of the work. Because if you get caught trying to memorize and remember and address the more basic approach that you could easily have done in the weeks leading up to rehearsals beginning, if you get stuck in that mode, you're actually hampering the ability for the show to develop and deepen, and you're just limiting yourself, really. So yeah, ideally we come in off book and also flexible to make changes and do things differently than the director wants. I definitely had a couple of the Dice With family members who I had kind of memorized little ticks into them as I was trying to build the characters and make them different. And the director wanted to shift that. So, for example, Asquith Jr. Is a character. He kind of started off sounding a little bit like Matt Berry, and then as we went on, they wanted him to sound a little more smarmy, a little more rich, even smarmier and even rich. And so he started talking through his teeth. And that became sort of what the character's focus was. So like, that doesn't necessarily affect the words, but it definitely affects how you memorize inflections and all kinds of choices.
Kudos to you that do the Green Show. I think it's just amazing. I was particularly impressed with how well you included the children, made it fun for all of us. And also as a musician, some questions. It was wonderful. And how do you get the songs? How do you get the sounds? I was looking all over for the musicians and didn't see any. It all worked out so well.
So that's a really good question. When they write the show, it's written around a theme based on the Shakespeare shows, and then our director and writer, Britannia Howe, she will grab songs from the certain themes or kind of like the genres of music she's looking for. So like our Highland was Scottish, like Scottish folk songs, we have sea shanties, we have Western, like classic country songs. And then we'll take those, we'll get the rights to them, and then we'll send them over to Brandon, who is our music, I don't know what the term would be, because it would be music director. He's the sound designer, I guess. He's the one who transcribes the music and gets all the sheet music down, and then we'll write all the accompaniment. And then it's handed over to Andrew Flash, who was our music director in-house, who would help us learn all the songs, learn all the harmonies, and be able to adapt to the tracks. Because working with tracks is different than working with a live orchestra, because that way you can adapt together. But in this case, we had to we'd have a plan already set with our music director, and then they'd have to send it over to Brandon, who was writing the tracks, and change a few tweaks, add different buttons to the end of songs. And working around that was really interesting, to be able to say, oh, we need to change how we're ending the choreography based on the track, based on how we're singing it. So everything had to kind of puzzle together and adapt to become one cohesive, not coercive, I know my words. I work with words, a one cohesive show. So I guess it was really interesting because Brandon's incredible. He does a lot of the music for a lot of the Shakespeare shows. Same with I think, was it Lindsay or Brandon, do we know, that did the little intro? Does anyone?
I think
was it Lindsay?
It's a long time ago.
Okay.
So I think maybe Lindsay.
We have two
but
incredible
it could be someone else
sound
as well.
designers, Lindsay and Brandon, who both work so well with creating the music of the shows and making this whole cohesive picture. And so that's always been really fun. And then sometimes we'll bring in live instruments as well, because I play the harmonica and the guitar for the Western night, our Mount Wilderness night, which has been really fun. So being able to balance that along with the track, along with our music director, it's been really, really exciting to see it all come together, especially for our final previews when we finally got to work with the tracks and go, wow, we have a show. Thank you. I'm glad.
What is the most embarrassing mistake that you've ever done in the show?
Ever? In these shows or in any show ever?
In both.
Both.
Your career.
In my career. Well, I'll tell you the second most embarrassing. In the production of As You Like It that Lena and I were in, when she was young and I was in college, I came out as Touchstone for my curtain call, and I'd visited the restroom, and I didn't realize that not only was my fly down, my tucked-in shirt was protruding through my fly, and it was canary yellow and unmistakable. That might be, up there. That was pretty embarrassing. And now, every time I come on stage right before, I do a little, all right, there's my fly. Okay, we're good. We're good.
Wow, good story. Hard to beat. In high school, we did a production of Once Upon a Mattress. I don't know if anyone knows the show. Okay, we know the show. Great to hear. I was playing the king, at this point. I was playing King Sextimus, and his most important feature is that he's mute and doesn't talk throughout the whole show. And there is a point in the show where we are running away from the queen, and I was backing up, and I don't know who they planned on playing the role, but my costume was like 4 sizes too big. So I'm wearing a very, very big jacket suit, little pantaloons, and then I was wearing my own like dress shoes at this point. It's a high school theater, you have to bring your own stuff sometimes. And they said, those shoes look too big. And I said, the rest of the costume does, so I don't know why that's the problem. So they gave me really, really tiny shoes and a really big costume. And I'm walking away in this fuddy-duddy costume, backwards, tiptoeing, and I twist my ankle. And I fall backwards. And the thing is, I can't make any noise because I'm mute. And that was very, very hard. So all I let out was a little and the entire pit lost their mind. And I fell to the ground and scrambled up behind a rose bush. And then, if you know Once Upon a Mattress, the next song is Normandy, which is a very big dance-heavy song. So we get up there, and it's me putting my hands on these other 2 actors, and they're just kind of dragging me through the song going, and then right after it is the big end of Act 1 Spanish Panic dance number. And the whole point of that dance number is that everyone gets so tired because it's so hard. And now imagine doing that with a twisted ankle and you can't make any noise. So that was my biggest moment of just stumbling through that and then twisting my ankle in the second act as well. So it was a really rough performance for me. That was my most embarrassing mistake, is going, like mumbling through the entire show for a silent character.
I think, though, a lot of actors are somewhat immune to embarrassment because what we do is so ridiculous anyway. You have to kind of, like, we've trained for years to lose our inhibitions and stop worrying what other people think.
This question is for Austin. First of all, your ensemble role in the Scottish play was just magnificent. You were my favorite ensemble member.
Thank you.
It was, the way you played off of the other actors was just so fun, and like your characters came alive even when you were working off of such awesome actors as well. My question is about the Green Show. What was the timeline for like auditions and rehearsals and like previews? What was the timeline for all of that?
Okay, so for the audition process, we do a different. There's actually 2 kind of audition processes, which was really interesting. So we have our first auditions for the fellows, which is separate from the original auditions for the rest of the company. We do it, I think, a month after is kind of the timeline, where we bring in SU students and go audition in our rehearsal hall. And it's the most intimidating experience because it's a pure white room, and you're in a big empty hallway, and there's 2 people at the very end, and you're in the very back, and you're like, I guess this is my first big audition. So there's that, and then getting cast is really exciting because you just hear that you're in the Green Show. And then the very first day, you're supposed to bring in a song, and so we each bring in a cut of a song, sing through that, and then get our scripts, and they have us read for different characters. I read for all 3 of the different male parts for the Western, which was, so finding out who we all were was really exciting to be like, we have no idea who's going to play what part. And so we read through the first 2 days, and then on the 3rd day we get cast, and then for that rest of that week, how it's laid out is that we have about a week for each show, because we do the Mariners' entire rehearsal, we block the entire show, and then put that aside, step back in and do the entire Highland show, put that aside, come back in and do the entire Mountain Wilderness show, and then jump immediately back into doing Mariners. Because this year we had to do a special performance, we got to, it was very exciting. We got to do a Special Olympics performance with the Utah Summer Games, where we picked back up our performance after not doing it for 2 whole weeks, and did the entire Mariners, had to reblock a few things because we did it inside of the auditorium over at SUU, which was very, very exciting. And after doing that, we got to come back here and then run through all our shows. And so that was really cool to be able to block all these things and have to put them in the back of our mind while still adding on an entirely separate show, being able to juggle those, pull them back out, and just be able to pull new jokes from other ones. There were a few jokes that we had to drop. Oh look, a few fellow Green Show members. Hey guys, good to see you guys. Speaking of, so being able to kind of juggle those roles and jump between shows was really exciting. There were a few bits we had to cut. One of our favorites, we did a whole bunch of rope magic tricks that we had been planning on doing through the entire performance. And then I think our final dress rehearsal right before we opened, Britannia was like, we're cutting those. We just can't do those. So Zach and I know a lot of really good rope tricks if you guys ever need to hire us for birthday parties. But yeah, it was a really cool and really interesting way to rehearse a whole bunch of shows at the same time.
One of the things I love about coming to the festival is I feel like every performance I sit in, I'm sitting in like an acting masterclass. And I feel like every time I take something new from it. I'm wondering what performances you've seen. I mean, I'm sure there's lots of live ones, but for the benefit of us, if there's any like film performances you've seen that have been really impactful.
Man, there's just so many options, and I think that maybe there's a distinction between things that build your foundation as like a kid that become very inform impressions and build your sensibility, and then stuff, you know, when you're more serious and a little bit older that you watch and you can actually really dissect. One for me was seeing in London. I got to see a couple amazing productions when I was on a study abroad. This was in 2009 or 2010. And one was Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen in Waiting for Godot, which was just an amazing production. I think they eventually took it to Broadway too after that. But you know, if you don't know that play, it's very absurd. It's absurdist, and a lot of the language is confusing and nonsensical, and so the actors get to sort of infuse it with whatever meaning, you know, they want, and that you can really draw an infinite number of paths through that story. But that was live, so that doesn't really answer your question. But I was talking before about the history of comedy. I grew up watching like Mel Brooks movies and a lot of Saturday Night Live, from the 70s, 80s, 90s, and then also now. But I think the art of comedy as a writerly and a crafted performance is a little bit in danger in Hollywood right now, because like if we think about the comedy as a movie art form, it's kind of turned into like loosely edited improv, where before, back in the 80s and 90s especially, people would write a script, and the script would be finished and it would be solid and funny, and then the studio would say, that script is good enough to make. But now in Hollywood, there's a lot of in-house development, and people say, well, we're going to make a Will Ferrell movie. And the movie will like develop around whatever Will Ferrell feels like doing. You know, that kind of thing has really taken over comedies. So I think going back and watching comedies from before the year 2000 is really important. I've definitely been in rehearsal rooms where you can sense that, you know, not to be ageist, but some of the younger actors don't have the luxury of having grown up watching great comedy. And there's a vocab that you can develop by watching lots of different styles. So, you know, I would say, like, for me, some of those formative movies were History of the World Part 1, Mel Brooks movie. A lot of Chris Farley movies from the 90s, like Tommy Boy, where he has this like total clown energy, but also is completely lovable, and there's a lot of really like touching acting in it. And then like the Kenneth Branagh Shakespeare series, I mean those are all masterclasses for sure. And what's fun about Kenneth Branagh is he'll also hire people who are not Shakespeare actors, so you can do a lot of comparing and contrasting between the performances. Like Keanu Reeves, who's a fantastic actor, is not a Shakespeare actor, so you can watch how he delivers his lines and say, how is that different from what Kenneth Branagh is doing? And you can learn a lot. You know, those things are very formative for me.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of a few good film performances. I think a lot of things that have helped me are watching just like really solid improv, and I emphasize on really good improv because there's a lot of really bad improv. Because I grew up watching Whose Line Is It Anyway, and I think watching a lot of delivery from that was really helpful to kind of finding the comedy in like just picking up on how a one-liner how a one-liner can be funny and what makes that funny. And this might be a weird choice. I love Wes Anderson movies, and I think the delivery on those is always really, really interesting to me, to see how they can take something that's like, maybe it's really funny, but take it really dryly, and how that can still get the point across and just gives a new perspective on delivery. I think that's what always gets me, is finding weird delivery that still enhances a performance. Because there's a lot of very obvious ways to say a line. You could read a line like, I'm very sad, and not like that. Please don't, if you see a show and someone delivers a line saying, I'm very sad in that line, don't see the rest of the show, leave. But just like finding new and interesting ways, and finding I love dry humor. I think dry humor is really interesting in the delivery and how it still gets the humor across. And I think that's where you can pick up on the nuances that make the performance really interesting.
One more recommendation. In terms of character doubling and playing different people, the show Orphan Black with Tatiana Maslany I would definitely recommend that if you're interested in that kind of like Dice with Family Green show stuff. She plays lots of characters, and it's sort of worked into the premise of the show. And seeing her be totally different people and almost unrecognizable sometimes is amazing.
I have a question for you. My question is what was your first Shakespeare show here at the Utah Shakespeare Festival? Like mine's was in 2017 with Cassie Bissell as Rosalind in As You Like It. What is your memory of the first Shakespeare show experience?
Well, mine is recent. I'm a new initiate to the festival, so I saw Much Ado About Nothing last year. I came out to audition in person and got to catch that show, and it was phenomenal. Absolutely loved it. Directed by Bradley Carroll, who's the music director for Gentleman's Guide to Love and Murder, and starring Melinda and Walter. And yeah, it was great. What a fun show. I had such a good time. And I walked the grounds and I thought, yeah, I want to work here. Okay. So, luckily it worked out.
I'm pretty sure because I first came here when I graduated high school and was looking at colleges here. I'm pretty sure my first was the King Lear they did in 2022. It was either that one or the All's Well That Ends Well that was that same year. I don't remember which one I saw in like which order, but they were both incredible. And I thought King Lear was really exciting because it was the first time I had seen a very fully fleshed out Shakespeare performance, because I feel like I've seen high school performances, I had seen like small community theaters, but this was the first one where I was like, oh, these are full like kings and warriors and people who are fighting, and I really got sucked into the performance and being like, oh, this is a very cool politically charged, like intriguing story. I'm actually invested and not just watching two guys walk around on stage and like yell at each other. This is great.
On that note, we are just about out of time. Thank you so much, Graham and Austin, for joining us today. If you haven't had a chance to see and don't have tickets to see any of the other shows these folks are in, what are you doing? Go get them. Our box office is open. It's right that way. As a reminder, the next thing we have going on in our Grove is going to be our matinee orientation at 1:15 for Dear Jack, Dear Louise, and Gentleman's Guide to Love and Murder, where you can see Graham wearing many, many hats, quite literally. Perfect. Thank you so much for joining us. If you would like a copy of this week's seminar newsletter, come grab that from us at front, and we will see you later today.
Try this one.
Thank you again. Thank you.